So in this lesson, I want to kind of show how the TI-84 can do a box and whisker plot. Sometimes this is called a box plot. So they're in a box plot, like I said, we're talking about, position. So looking at our graphic down here, the minimum value and the maximum value are going to be two important pieces. And it's easy to identify out of the data if it's sorted. And then we have these quartiles. So we have Q1 is quartile 1, Q2 or the median is quartile 2, and Q3 is quartile 3. Now remember, since this is quartiles, 25% of the data is going to be between the minimum and quartile 1. 25% of the data is going to be between quartile 1 and quartile 2. 25% of the data is going to be between quartile 2 and quartile 3. And then, of course, 25% of the data will be between quartile 3 and the maximum entry. So notice that between quartile 1 and quartile 3, remember we call that also that's where you get the interquartile range, just subtracting those two values. But notice that 50% of the data is going to be between quartile 1 and quartile 3. And then your whiskers is where you're going to have 25% of data on the left whisker and 25% of the data on the right whisker. So let's see if we can actually generate a box and whisker and see if we can identify these pieces on a box and whisker plot. So I have this data here that we want to input. So remember to put data in, that's the stat button. And then we have to edit, so that's number 1 or enter. Notice I already have data in here, so I have to go up arrow, hit clear, and I can come down arrow and I can start inputting the data. So I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to go ahead and put that data in. So I have now entered all 12 data entries. And so from there, what we want to do is we want to actually create a box and whisker plot to create a summary of some items here. And the box and whisker will have 5 pieces: the minimum, quartile 1, quartile 2, quartile 3, and then of course the maximum entry will also be able to be identified. So to do this, there's a stat plot. Let me go ahead and make this a little bigger now. So now we have this stat plot that's above the y equals. Notice that the stat plot is in blue. So the first thing you have to do is hit the second button, hit the y equals button, and that'll create the stat plot. Notice I have plot 1, plot 2, plot 3, and they're all off. So I'm going to just go ahead and choose plot 1. I'm going to hit enter. And right now, notice how the dark spot is off. I need to turn it on. So notice how it's blinking on. If I enter, my plot is now activated. Now, if I come down, there's different types of plots. So the plot we're looking for is kind of the box and whisker spot. So this one demonstrates outliers, which is probably the one that we can most commonly use. And then this one has no outliers. So I'm going to go ahead and just choose the one that has the low outlier as well. So I'll hit enter. And then as I come down through here, notice I'm coming from list 1, which is important. That's where my data is at. And I'll be using a little square to represent any kind of outlier. And let's see if this color is actually blue. I'm not really sure what's going to happen there. So I've got my stuff entered there. Again, right above mode is quit. So if I hit the second button, hit mode, it'll quit and get me back out. If I want this screen clear, I can just hit clear there. The next thing to do to create the box and whisker is we have to go to window. So window is the next piece here. So I have to create a window. Now let me bring this back over. So window is going to have these values with respect to the X. So if I go back to if I look at my data, it looks like the smallest value is around 150. Looks like the biggest value is around 180. So I don't need an X min to be -10. I could probably make my X min around maybe 100 and maybe 150. Actually, let's don't get that close. Let's do 145, just a little bit under it. Now my X max has to go on their side of 180. So we can kind of change that to then 180. Actually, let's make it a little bit past 180. Because actually there's a 182 there. So let's make it 185. Let's see if that actually works for us. It's kind of delete that off there. 185 looks good. My scale, let's try ones. We may actually probably just go ahead and change it to twos. So I remember my tick marks are gonna be counting my twos. So the Y min and Y max, so to have it display on the screen fairly decently, I think I'm gonna try a -1 to get a little bit below the x-axis. Let's try the Y max to be maybe, let's try 2. Let's see what that does, see if it gives us a good display. So it looks like I've got that all entered in. So I go ahead and now quit that. So now if I go to graph, let's see if it actually generates what we want. It looks like I got a couple things going on here. So let's hit Y equals and see what else we got. Looks like I got something in Y1. Let's clear that off. Let's go back to graph. So notice how I have a graph up here. Notice how it does show an outlier in our data. That would probably be the 150, because it looks like all of our data really is up in the 170s, 180s. So if I hit the trace button, notice down here at the bottom, it gives me X is 170. Notice that's on the far left. I even go further. Notice that the 150, that's actually an outlier. So it actually points to that. So on the trace button, hit my left and right arrows. So that's going to be the minimum value of 170. This is going to be quartile 1. Notice how it says Q1, 172. The median or quartile 2 is 177. Quartile 3 is 180. And the whisker on the end, the maximum would be the 182. So it looks like that worked out pretty good. It displayed it fairly decently. So you have to kind of play with your scales so that it fits. So as long as you have the box and whisker on there, it really doesn't matter how it is. But if you're trying to match it with a multiple choice question, you have to try to see if you can create the scales similar to what they have in my lab. So I'll stop there. So that's how you can make a box of whiskers flat on the TI-84. Feel free to watch this one again.